amazing. My community was amazing. Thankfully, a year later, I walked on to a junior college and tried out for the basketball team, and I made the team. I ended up getting a full scholarship. I moved 4 hours away from home. I still hadn't learned my lesson, though. As soon as those freshman parties started, I was the first one there and the last one to leave. I wanted to be the center of attention. I remember the day before my freshman season started, we were in practice, and I jumped up to try to block a guy, and I landed on his foot, and I tore all the ligaments in my ankle, and that was the end of my basketball career. I was done. And here I was again, finally thinking I had gotten this opportunity, and it was over again. But God had a completely different plan for my life. My roommate had this acoustic guitar in the corner of our apartment, and I remember picking his guitar up one day while he was gone. And as soon as I held that guitar, it was like, where has this been all my life? You know, it felt like an old friend, and it felt natural. And I sat on the edge of my bed that year with a poster on the wall and taught myself how to play some guitar chords and fell in love with music. And so the next semester I took a creative writing class and I started writing poetry. And I kind of figured out pretty quick that if I could write some poems and turn them into songs, I could be a rock star because I could already out-party anybody that I knew. And so I thought that's what you did. If you played music, I thought you lived a certain life and you were a certain person. So for the next 15 years of my life, I struggled daily with just living this life in excess and trying to be this person I thought I needed to be. I didn't think about tomorrow. I didn't think about the people around me, who I was hurting, how it was affecting me. In my late 20s, I met my wife. And she had 2 small kids when we met, and I can remember saying things to her like, I'm never going to change. Like, this is who I am. I'm a rocker, you know, like, this is it. And we had a little boy about a year later, and things didn't change. If anything, they got worse. And then about 3 years later, we had a little girl on the way, and I was getting ready to leave for Europe for the summer. I was in a rock band at the time, and we were going on tour. And I remember my wife came to me, and she said, Zach, if you can't make some changes for your family, for us, then we're out. Like, we can't sit around and watch this anymore. You're going to hurt yourself, and we just don't want to be involved in that. That was tough to hear because she was right, and I knew that. I was already carrying around the guilt, the shame, because I'd been raised to know better. I knew Jesus. I never once doubted that he didn't exist. But I remember leaving for that tour, and I said, God, if you're real, and you're who you say you are, and you can prove it, then I'll walk away from this band, and I'll follow you. And I just kind of left it at that. 2 weeks into the tour, we were in Europe. We were driving across Spain. I was reading a book and listening to some music, and I took my headphones off and I closed the book and was just staring out the window of this bus as we were driving down the highway. And our bus driver barely spoke English, but he was scanning radio stations in the front. And it stops on a song called Redeemed by Big Daddy Weave. Yeah. And the song completely got my attention because I knew that wasn't supposed to be on the radio. And it was like God just ordained that moment for me. And I went back to the hotel and I looked up that song and I looked those lyrics up, and it just clicked that the God I grew up thinking I knew was not the God that was getting my attention in that moment. I had this idea when I was a kid that God just sat on his throne all day, you know, with his arms crossed, just shaking his head at everything that Zach did wrong. I didn't understand how much he loved me. I didn't understand the sacrifice. But here I was with my own children, my own family, and I knew how much I was willing to do for them. I'd seen my parents and my wife and my kids sacrifice for me. And it was like God just said, Zach, if it was just for you, I would have gone to the cross so that you could have a new life. If it was just for anybody in this room, I would have gone to the cross so that they could have a new life, a better life, a life that they could never even imagine. And I called Crystal. I said, hey, I'm coming home. I'm done with this band. I said, we're going to find a church. We found a church in our hometown, and about a year later, I helped them launch a campus, and I went to work for them. And while I was working there, I got an opportunity to come to Nashville and write some music. And on one of my first trips to Nashville, I wrote a song called Chainbreaker, which completely changed my life. And signed a record deal at 38 years old, and had been chasing that for years, and God just kind of handed it to me. And so I say that to say, it's been almost 10 years. I get to travel around, share my story, tell you guys what God's done in my life, what he can do in your life if you just surrender to him. But what I'm saying is, it's not always been perfect. Like, being a Christian is not easy sometimes. If anything, it's harder than not being a Christian sometimes. And sometimes the highs are super high, and sometimes the lows can be super low. But I've learned this, in all of those valleys that I've been in my life, in those last 10 years especially, every valley that I've been in, God has taken that to a mountaintop. He's used it for my good and for His glory. And sometimes I can stand up here and just kind of get lost talking. I love writing music because I love to share a story in about 3 or 4 minutes. And so I wrote a song I want to share with you guys tonight. This is called Story of My Life.